It's the International Soccer Preview, and we are Soccer Files Canada. Welcome to our continuation of Series 19, this one looking at the players of the 2023 Asian Cup. This episode is part 2 on the players of India, final selections and starter predictions. Here we go. Hello, we are back for part 2 of our mediacast on the players of the 2023 Asian Cup. The final roster is released and we are looking at India's selections. In part 1, we compiled a list of players and their likelihood of reaching the final squad. That was based mostly on their participation over the past 2 years, but we did consider a few other factors as well. Today we review that list now that the final squads have been announced, and we said we would point out any surprises, any notable non-selections. We do have some, any surprise inclusions and new players. We also said we would cover any injuries, and we have some of those. We will do all of those things as we go through the list again. At the end, we'll also boldly predict our starting lineup in the Spotlight Review. Let's jump right in, and we're going to begin with some team information here. Teams were allowed to bring 26 players to the tournament, and India named a 50-man preliminary squad. So I think that covers most males playing soccer in India at this current time. That's ridiculous, but it is a huge preliminary squad. That means they had to cut 26 players. We won't be introducing the new players they introduced during that squad, but any of the players that were on our list that made the preliminary squad and were then cut, we will cover. In terms of games, India, since we did our last podcast, we did it before the 2 November World Cup qualifiers, so we have those. That'll help us determine the starting lineup, or in the case of India, kind of really confuses the issue. They did not play any pre-tournament friendlies, which most teams did, so we don't have any information there. So a bit of a limited information to go on in terms of predicting the starters, but our main purpose here is really predicting the selection. So let's begin with the candidates, and we start with the manager. The outgoing manager was Stephen Constantine. He led them through the 2019 Asian Cup and left in 2019, so he wasn't that current. The current manager is Igor Stimac, and he was not changed since we last did the part 1 of the media cast, so we consider him as having been selected. Let's move on to goalkeepers, and we'll begin with the candidates that we had. So we had definite candidate Gurpreet Singh Sandhu, and then likely candidate Amrinder Singh, and then 2 possible candidates, Vishal Kaith and Gurmeet Singh. And for all of these positions, we did have a few players, or for most of them, who were possible but unlikely or seemingly off the squad. We didn't put them on the list, but we will add them if they were selected. So let's go back. Our definite candidate, Gurpreet Singh Sandhu, was selected, and so was likely candidate Amrinder Singh. And between the possible candidates, the first one, Vishal Kaith, was selected for the final squad. Gurmeet Singh selected for the preliminary squad, but not the final squad. So that's what we have there. 3 goalkeepers, and we'll talk about which one we think is going to be the starter when we get to the end. But let's move on to defenders and central defense. So we had 2 definite candidates, Sandesh Jingam and also Mehtab Singh. We had a likely candidate in Anwar Ali, and then a possible candidate in Lechung Nunga. Those were the only 4 candidates in central defense. Usually they bring a few more than that. Sandesh Jhingan, our definite candidate, was selected, as was the other definite candidate, Mehtab Singh. However, big news here, Anwar Ali, not selected due to ankle injury. We did have a concern in part one that he had not been selected for the last match because he was a regular starter. And perhaps that last match was the start of the ankle injury from which he didn't recover in time. So Anwar Ali, not even named to the preliminary squad. So they obviously knew that injury was going to keep him out. The possible candidate, Leichung Nunga, was selected for the final squad. And we had a player who was seemingly off the squad that was selected, but only for the preliminary squad and not the final squad. So we won't confuse matters by adding him to the list. Let's move on to left backs. And we had a definite candidate in Akash Mishra and two possible candidates, Subhashish Bozi and Nairam Roshan Singh. And all three of those candidates selected for the final squad. So the definite candidate, Akash Mishra, and possible candidates, Subhashish Bozi and Nairam Roshan Singh, all selected for the final squad. Let's move on to right backs, and no definite candidate here, but a likely candidate in Nikhil Pujari. And then two possible candidates, Pritam Kotal. Three possible candidates there. I think I'm getting ahead of myself because I didn't name the candidate. So let's just start over and name Nikhil Pujari as the likely candidate. Pritam Kotal, Rahul Beki, and Ashish Ray. Those were the three possible candidates. So as we saw, Pujari selected, Kotal selected, Rahul Beki also selected, and Ashish Rai selected for the preliminary squad, but not making the final cut there. Okay, on to midfielders, and we begin with defensive midfielders. And we had a definite candidate in Jigsan Singh, and another one, a likely candidate in Rohit Kumar. And then we had a possible candidate in Suresh Singh. We might as well deal with these now. We kind of combined that with central midfield in part one, but there's big news here. Jikash Singh, the regular starter there, not selected or selected for the preliminary squad, but not the final squad due to injury. Confirmed to be out injured, and that could be the only explanation because he really was a definite candidate. So a big loss for them, along with Ali Anwar in defence, and there's one more to come. But also surprising, the likely candidate, Rohit Kumar, also not selected. I didn't read of any injury with him, so it seems like he was just simply not chosen. He was for the preliminary squad, but not for the final squad. So it just seems he didn't make the cut. Instead, Suresh Singh, our possible candidate, was selected. And we do have a new candidate here in central or as a defensive midfielder added to the list, Deepak Tangri, and he was selected both for the preliminary and final squads. So he's a 24-year-old with no caps. He had never appeared for the national team before being named to the preliminary squad, and he plays. He's always played his club soccer in Europe. In India, I should say. Currently with Mohan Bagan. So added to the list. On to central midfielders, where we had a definite candidate in Anirudh Thapa, and that was the only candidate. We actually had two candidates at the possible but unlikely level. and one of them was selected, so we'll be adding him to the list. But let's deal with definite candidate Andrew Thapa and say that he was selected for the final squad. And then the possible but unlikely candidate that was selected was Leung Mwaja Ralti. I'll just call him Ralti because that's a difficult name. Ralti, and he actually has been getting some game time in the World Cup qualifiers, as we'll see soon. So the reason we didn't have him on the list was that he did join the team in June. Returned after an absence in June 2023. Started one game and on the bench for one, and then disappeared again for the last 10 games. So that's why we didn't have him on the list. But he's back and actually starting, as I said, which we'll get to in the spotlight review. Okay, left midfielders and right midfielders. We had one left midfielder seemingly off the squad who wasn't even named to the preliminary squad. And for right midfielders, we had no candidates at all. Those positions or players being labeled in those positions kind of going out of fashion. Let's move on upfield to the left wingers, and this covers left wingers, left attacking midfielders, and left forwards sometimes. It's kind of the upper left quadrant of the field. And we had a definite candidate in Nairemahesh Singh, and we had a possible candidate in Nandakumar Sekar. There. We also had two possible but unlikely candidates here, and one of them made it to the squad. I'll tell you just by name, but we won't put him on the list. Nara Mahesh Singh, surprisingly, a definite candidate here, but named only to the preliminary squad and not the final squad. In truth, we had him as a definite because he was always called up. But he had started only 5 of the games and was subbed in for 8. Still a surprise that he was not selected. Also, just making the preliminary squad is our possible candidates, Sekar, and then the possible but unlikely candidate is Bipin Singh, who had been not selected for the last 12 matches when we did part 1, but nevertheless named to the preliminary squad, but none of them named to the final squad. So we're going to have to see what they're going to do for this position. Let's go over to the right wing, and we had a definite candidate in Lalianzuala Changti, and a likely candidate in Udanta Singh, and then a possible candidate in Rahul Praveen. Here too, we had a possible but unlikely candidate who was selected for the preliminary squad, and I'll dispense with that now. It was Mohammed Yasir, but just made the preliminary squad and not the final squad. More to the point, though, we have a new candidate added to the list. It's Vikram Partap Singh, who was selected for the final squad. So let's talk about him briefly. Partap Singh is born in 2002, so he's 21 years old and plays for Mumbai City in India there. He had actually appeared on our list for the national team, so we did have him on our list because he was on the bench twice in September 2022, but we felt that wasn't enough to put him on the list. So bit of a surprise selection there given his lack of involvement, but nevertheless selected for the final squad. As was our definite candidate, Changti, and our likely candidate, Udanta Singh. Also, the possible candidate, Rahul Praveen, was selected for the squad. So we see no left wingers, but we have 4 right wingers. So you can guess that that's who they use, or among those who they use as left wingers. Let's move on to the forward line and specifically the attacking midfielders. So generally we mean central attacking midfielders here. And we had a definite candidate in Sahal Abdul Samad, and a possible candidate Brandon Fernandez. Both of these candidates made the final squad. So Sahul Abdul Samad and Brandon Fernandez. And that was all the candidates there. And we move on to the forwards. We had no players coded as secondary strikers. The forward, we had definite candidate Sunil Chetri. Despite being 39 years old, he's still going strong. According to one article I read, getting better even with age. So Sunil Chetri. We had a injury candidate. Initially, we had him as a likely candidate, Ashik Kuranian. But we knew in part one that he had an injury and would be out until next May. So we could confidently put him on the injury list. So another loss for India there. The other likely candidate was Liston Kolako. And then we had two possible candidates in Manveer Singh and Rahim Ali. So let's look and see what happened with these players here. Sunil Chetri, no surprise that he was selected for the squad, and he is the captain of the team. The likely candidate, Liston Kolako, he was selected. Of course, the other likely candidate, Ashi Kurunian, out with injury. And the first of the possible candidates, Manveer Singh, selected, but Rahim Ali only selected for the preliminary squad, but not the final squad. One player we had seemingly off the squad, Isham Pandita, was selected here. And so we'll tell you a little bit about him. Since 2021, he's been with India, 6 caps and 1 goal and 25 years of age. And the reason we didn't have him on the list was that he had last appeared in September 2022. So we thought he was well off the squad, but making a comeback here is Isham Pandita. I was kind of hoping that the other seemingly off the squad player, Jej Pakla, would be selected, but he has actually retired from international soccer, only 31 years old, but retired from club and country. Okay, that brings us to the end of our list, and we move on. We again have about 20 players here on the list with various involvement to the team who made the preliminary squad, but not the final squad. We've mentioned of a couple of them as we go, but about 20 of them, or 15 to 20, were not on our list in the first place. Many of them never appearing for the team before. Okay, but it is time. It is time to move on to the spotlight review of the players that we think are going to start. So a bit tongue-in-cheek, we do this because, you know, we never really know. And we always get surprised when the first team comes out. But anyway, manager Igor Stimac will consider a starter, as it were. And then, hang on, I'm just going to find my spot again on my list so I can say what I need to say as we're going through this. Goalkeeper Gurpreet Singh Sandhu, we think is a definite starter. Actually, Amrinder Singh did start the second World Cup qualifying game, but we don't think Singh Sandhu's starting position is under threat because of that. In central defense, well, it was consistently Sandesh Jingan and Ali Anwar, as to the point that we weren't even sure who the main backups were going to be. Anyway, we still put Sandesh Jingan as a definite starter, but now we're not now. We only have a hint of who's going to be, and who it was in the World Cup qualifiers were out of position players. So a real shortage of central defenders for them here, and the ones they do have, they don't actually use. So it was actually Rahul Beke, and we did see him standing in central defense before, but he also did in one of the 2 World Cup qualifiers. We also saw left back Mishra in the World Cup qualifiers playing alongside Jingan. So of the 2, we would say Rahul Beki looks like the first backup central defender. And because Anwar Ali is out, we give him a likely chance of being a starter in central defense here. Let's move on to left back, to the player we just mentioned, and Akash Mishra. We've now put him as a likely. At the end of part 1, we would have put him as a definite, but he didn't play either game as left back in the World Cup qualifiers there in November. He did start 1 game as a central defender, as we saw, but now we're in a bit of doubt as to whether he is going to be the left back. We think Bose actually might have a chance of being the starter there. On the right back position, we think it is going to be a rotation, or possibly one or the other, of Nikhil Pujari or Rahul Beke, even though Beke seems to be slated as a central defender here, especially with Anwar gone. We still do see him starting as a right back. So in this case, we might actually see both of these players get starts. In the central midfield, we were very steady with Jeekson Singh and Thapa. So we saw Jeekson Singh is out injured. Thapa played only 1 of the preliminary games, and that was as an attacking midfielder. So they're kind of rewriting the whole book in the central midfield. And we think perhaps Suresh Singh and Ralti, who started both World Cup qualifying games, might be the starters there. But as you saw, we had ranked Suresh Singh as only a possible candidate, and Ralti as a possible but unlikely. So they're not experienced in that position at all. Nevertheless, we are going to put as a likely starter Suresh Singh, but they really have to figure things out there. And we're going to see that in the top end of the field. Things are very unsettled. And we're surprised for that reason that they didn't play a couple of friendlies pre-tournament, actually. But left wing, we're not even going to nominate a candidate. The left winger, Nayarim Singh, did start 1 of the World Cup qualifying games, but as a right winger. The out-of-position players starting on the left wing were a right winger and a forward. So really unsettled there. We have no idea what they're going to do. On the right side, though, we do think Changti, Lalianzuala, Changti has a potential to be a starter. We're putting him in blue highlight, saying that we think it's likely, but we're kind of hedging our bet. So he did seem to have the position nailed down, did Changti, until he didn't start either of the World Cup qualifying games as a right winger. He started 1 as a left winger. So they're kind of all over the place here. Central, we didn't have a name for left winger, Changti for right winger. Central attacking midfield, they don't use a position that much, but they did use it once in the World Cup qualifiers, and it was central midfielder Thapa. So we see a lot of players playing out of position here for India. The forwards, though, there's no doubt about it. It's Sunil Chetri as the starter. Number 11. Keep your eye out for him. And we do have one special mention, kind of a player. We're not really sure where he's going to start, but we think it's likely that he will be a starter. It's Sahal Abdul Samad. So he is designated or labeled as an attacking midfielder, but he sometimes plays central midfield or somewhere else on the field. In the his only start of the World Cup qualifying games, he popped up as a left midfielder, as he is wont to do. Kind of pop up in any position. Okay, that is it for the Spotlight review. And that is also it for our look at India. So part one, where we compiled the list of candidates and their likelihood. And part two, as we went through it, a couple of players surprised, or not surprisingly, because we know they're injured, but Jeekson and Ali Anwar at the back, big losses there, Jeekson Singh. And even up front, even though we knew about it ahead of time, it's still a bit of a loss, the Ashi Kurunian. So India kind of coming in, and a bit of a concern too, I gotta say, about the lack of settled positions up front and the players coming in and out and playing out of position and all. It looks quite unstable. Anyway, that is the team as we see it, and we hope actually familiarizing yourself with the team leads to a better enjoyment of the cup. We'd like to thank Naver Avichan and Pixabay for the wonderful music you hear in this mediacast. The title is called Arabic Trap.